This is the Dad and Joe Show. I'm the dad.
I'm the Joe.
And this is the show where we encourage fathers and sons to have meaningful life conversations about important topics that keep us awake and sober. Today, our episode is on the narrow road. Narrow path. To start, I would like for you to share with me the difference between fourth grade football and varsity football.
Deep. Very deep.
Coaching, what you had to do, games, preparation. Just talk to me about the differences between the two.
Okay. Fourth grade, I would say didn't really play that much. Kind of just running around. I think I didn't really eat anything before games. And practices, didn't really do anything. I don't really know. Just really nonchalant. Didn't care about the games. Like, I kind of just showed up, didn't prep for them. But now varsity football, it's kind of like practices are 2.5 hours right after school. Before games, we have like a team meal, and then you don't eat before there, and you're really specific on what you do eat. So after the game, after the pregame meal, we can only eat a granola bar, a chewy granola bar, an orange, or a banana. So they just had those set out in water.
Okay.
And then we have like time to get our minds right, and we have to be there for 2 hours before the game, to eat, and then,
So would you say the expectations that 4th, 5th, 6th grade coaches had for you is different than your varsity coaches, or about the same?
Different, way different.
Okay, so let's say that this year you played varsity football.
Right.
Let's say that you went to one of your coaches and you scraped your finger a little bit. How well would that go over?
It wouldn't even go over.
Okay.
Nothing would happen.
It wouldn't go over so well. All right, this is my point. Today's theme is on the narrow road, the narrow path.
Right.
And the higher that you go up in sports, the narrower things get. So your preparation is different. You can't get away with as much. You can't, you choose to eat different foods. You just didn't go out and, stay up late. Speaking of staying up late, you didn't stay up late the night before. At least they encourage you to get enough sleep.
Yeah.
So the path becomes a whole lot narrower the older that you get in university sports. Now, if you go on to play college, or even if you play professional ball, it even gets more and more and more narrow. Whether your diet, your preparation, what you do on and off the field, etc. Okay, talk to me about school differences. If the same applies between, let's say, elementary, even junior high, between your junior and high school now, do you see the same thing happening in school? Things getting narrower, requirements going higher.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For sure. Just like studying. I didn't really study in 4th grade, or like even middle school. You didn't have finals in middle school either. Did you?
Yeah,
No, you
probably
didn't
at final tests.
Didn't have finals
A little
in middle
different.
school. Didn't really care about school. Homework was way easier. I didn't really have homework, honestly. So, but now it's kind of like, I got finals next week, got to study, got to make sure, got to find out what grade I have to get so that I keep an A in the class, what grade I have to get on the test so that I can get an A in the class. So
Expectations have gone up.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a bit. Okay, let's talk about relationships and about how we conduct ourselves. I'll share with you a story that I had a number of years ago. I was working for a company part-time, and there was another woman in the office that I was working with, and I was asking her how to do something, and I didn't honestly know how to do something, and she was supposed to be the person I was supposed to be training me in. Well, I asked her a question about something, and she rolled her eyes at me. And the lady rolled her eyes at me. And I looked at her and I said, "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" And I was shocked because it was so unprofessional that a grown woman would treat me in such an unprofessional manner. Now, I can imagine a little kid doing it, having a tantrum or being super moody or having an anger problem. But in a professional work environment, I was shocked that this woman just sat there and, did one of these teenage roll their eyes at me kind of.
I would be blown away.
So,
You don't get many people doing that in high school either, rolling their eyes.
well, she did it to me.
That was wild.
So
That's wild.
in a professional setting,
Right.
you are expected to show up to work on time. You just don't show up late. You treat people with respect. You do your work. You know how to do your job. You're somewhat competent. And yet what ends up happening is that they just think people should, hey, love me because of who I am, because I exist. And they don't start narrowing their path. The older they get, they keep their behaviors the same, So what you end up having is a bunch of adults that act like kids. Or you have a bunch of adults that go out together and they party like they were in college and act like idiots and go home drunk and get Ubers home and all this. And here they are, older adults with families, and they're partying like they were in college, or they act like they were in college, or they've never really grown up and matured. And so this is a part of the narrow path that is important in staying awake and sober, is that we change our expectations as we get older. And that means that instead of just doing whatever we want to do, we realize, okay, I can't just stay up all night anymore. I just can't eat whatever foods that I'm going to eat anymore. I need to do certain things if I'm going to keep myself healthy. I'm going to act a certain way if I'm going to keep my relationships in a good way, in a better place, and succeed in life.
Yeah.
And unless you embrace a narrow path, you end up blowing your life up.
Right.
And so let's read that one verse in the Bible. This is Matthew 7, 13 and 14. Why don't you take a look at that?
Matthew 7, 13, 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. I'm going to read one more time, just so that we can get it, and I don't put a comma right between easy and destruction, okay? Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few.
So what are some things that you see in that verse? The gate, the
one,
way that's wide.
One, just enter by the narrow gate. That's it. All we know right now is it's a narrow gate, right? But it says, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are by many. So the first thing in verse 13 is enter by the narrow gate. And the thing that follows
Who's saying these words? It's in red.
Yeah, Jesus is
saying these words, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing we see is enter by the narrow gate.
So those are his instructions.
Those are his instructions.
Okay.
Enter by the narrow gate, not the gate that we just said. So, for the gate is wide, that's not the gate he wants us to enter by.
Right.
The gate he wants us to enter by is the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. So
he's contrasting two different paths in life.
Two different gates.
He's saying enter by the narrow gate,
right?
But then he starts with the how did we get those balloons? That was funky. Oh, anyway, we both just saw a bunch of balloons pop up on the screen. Anyway, maybe you saw
did too.
Okay, well, anyway, so he's saying enter by the narrow gate. Then he goes on to explain some things about the wide gate. What does he say?
He says the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter it are many.
So it's wide, and it's easy.
Easy.
Okay, so it's the race that the gate, the way that's wide. In other words, you get to do whatever you want.
Yep.
That's super easy.
No cares.
Do whatever you want.
No liabilities for anybody.
And how many people go through that gate?
Many people.
A lot of people choose that gate. Why do you think a lot of people choose that gate?
It's easy.
It's super easy.
Flowing through life.
That's right. But what does he say about the narrow gate, the gate that we're supposed to go through?
It's hard and it leads to life.
All right. Why don't you think people go through that gate more often? It says
two words.
It says few enter it.
2 words.
Yep.
Hard.
Yep.
And life. That's it. People don't want to deal with life. One. People want to do hard things. And the main thing
Oh.
how to get through life is to do hard things. You're not going to get through life if you just don't do hard things. If you try to avoid hard things, you're not going to get through life.
That's good.
You know? So, and it also says those who find it are few. Those, no, not the, it doesn't say those who enter by it are many. It says those who find it are few. So not many
Okay.
people find it. You have to find it by going through things that are hard that leads to life, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah,
You know?
that's really good. Well, it goes back to a little bit. I think it's our episode 2 where we talked about developmental vacation,
Mhm.
where you said developmental vacation is the wide gate. It's like instead of going through something that's hard so that I can develop and mature the way that I'm supposed to,
Yeah.
I go around discipline instead of taking correction for my good. I go around it instead of embracing that and maturing. I take the wide. I take the wide path.
And I feel like Jesus really says those who enter it are many. You know, he contrasts
gate?
he contrasts the wide gate with enter to find, because you have to find it to get into the narrow gate.
Yeah.
But you just have to do whatever you need to do, and it's just like a wide open gate. You can just go open, like you don't even realize you're going through it.
So it takes work.
So it takes work, and you really have to find where to go, who to hang out with, obviously figuratively, but like who to hang out with, who your faith is in, etc. So that's why.
So I'll give one last example about how life narrows. Life narrowing is actually part of God's plan.
Mhm.
You're put in a family. That family allows you a great deal of freedom, but they also give you protection, and they allow you to experience and make mistakes with minimal consequences because you're part of the family. And that's why mom and dads will discipline their children, is to try to correct them and help to guide them on their way.
Right.
If a child doesn't yield to that, instead of being corrected by your family, you start getting corrected by hardship in life. And so what I want to say is that narrow isn't bad. Narrow is something that's actually really good. I'll give you one example. Let's take marriage.
Mm.
So I don't act the same way with my wife, your mom, the way I acted in high school. I think very differently. Instead of me thinking, hey, is she for me? Is she cute? Would things work out? I'm thinking I have a wife and I'm devoted to her.
Right.
So the narrowing in relationships, specifically between a man and a woman, is a very good thing. It's for covenant, and for your relationship, you decide to make a choice. So that means I don't spend time with other women. I'm devoted to mom. I choose what I look at, what I listen to, and how my emotions engage. I am more careful with how I treat her. I just don't treat her like I might treat somebody else. So there's a whole bunch of narrowing that has to happen in my life if I want to have a successful marriage. If I don't care, then I can blow my marriage up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they get married and then they still act like they are not married.
Mhm.
So that type of narrowing is,
Or do what they want to do.
or do what you want to do.
You gotta act like you are one and do things that are in unison with you and your partner. Obviously, I don't know anything, but what I've read is, like abide in your spouse. If that makes sense. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah. Well,
Technically, I don't even know what abide means, but all I know is that, abide in Christ.
Yeah.
Do as He says,
Yeah.
and do as follow Him as what He's doing. But
Well,
I
let's
feel like you want-
let's take faith then. Let's take faith. So it's one thing to grow up. Okay, I believe there's a God, and you go to church, and your life's pretty good, but all of a sudden, if your faith is going to start to narrow because Jesus says, "I want a relationship with you,"
Right.
I'm going to start leading you I'm going to start narrowing your life, not so that you can have all these restrictions, but so that you can be prepared for what I have for you.
Mhm.
So this is the analogy that I like for us to get, is that when a lot of times we don't like our life narrowing because it feels restrictive, it feels like I have a list of all these things I can't do. It's kind of like in the Garden of Eden. Imagine this massive garden that God creates for Adam and Eve. He says, explore the entire garden. except I don't want you to eat from this one tree.
Mm.
There's just one tree.
Just one.
The rest of the garden they could explore, they could eat everything that was in the garden except for one tree. So it was actually a pretty wide variety of things that they got to choose from. But instead of feeling, wow, look at all that God has provided for us, Satan came along and tempts them and says, look at what God is keeping from you.
Mm.
And they felt restricted. And instead of seeing the blessing of the bounty that's around them and realizing that this restriction or this narrow path was for the purpose of having a good relationship with
Right.
God, they saw it as restriction of the enemy, twisted that message from God, and saw that as a restriction. And that's just what can happen in our lives. We look at these restrictions that come into our lives as we get older with little things like sleep and homework and relationships and having to work a job and all these things. We can look at these things as all these are restrictions and want to go on our own developmental vacation. We want to throw off these restraint. Remember we talked about in a session on vision about how if we don't have a vision, that we cast off restraint, we cast off this narrow path that God has for us, not to restrict us, but so that we can be the elite people that and for what he's called us to do. We can be prepared for what he calls us to do.
Right.
Think about athletes. I mean, elite athletes.
Right.
They just don't live the way they want to. Elite Olympic athletes. Olympians don't get to do whatever they want. Bodybuilders. Yeah. Well, anybody who's really good at anything
or striving to meet a goal.
They narrow their path so that they can be prepared for their calling, for their goals in life.
Be ready for the consequences that'll come.
And there's consequences for the narrow path.
And the hardships
And
that
hardships.
will come. So like
Yep.
bodybuilders can't eat whatever they want to eat.
Yep.
Athletes can't go party the night before their game, etc. You know, like stuff that they may want to do, they won't be able to do because they have a main goal.
Yep.
That's why we also, relating back to our other subjects, is, oh my gosh, I just had a brain fart and oh my gosh.
These were our subjects we've done.
I can't believe it. Vision. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's why to have vision, you have to have a goal, right? And to have a goal, there's going to be hardships. So to go through and get to the goal, you have to go through hardships,
Right.
but you have to have vision before you have hardships, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sometimes you have hardships because you make stupid choices.
Right.
Because you don't have a vision.
Right.
And so you run in, especially when you talk about, you get involved with addiction kinds of things, you decide to throw off all restraint and engage whatever you want just to have fun.
Right.
And instead of narrowing your vision and realizing that there's a narrow path, that's the perfect example of the scripture, is that wide is the way that leads to destruction. And there's many that fall into it because they refuse to see that the narrow path is actually something really good for them. And it makes you an elite person, and prepared for what God has for you in the future.
No.
All right. So how does this relate to being awake and sober? The narrow path.
It relates to being awake and sober because if you don't have a
Alert and sober. Awake and sober. Yes.
Awake and
Yeah.
sober, or alert and sober.
Yeah.
You know,
It's the same.
to have an awake and sober life, you have to have a goal to not go on a developmental vacation, which is what we also talked about.
Yep.
So, it applies to the narrow gate as we see in Matthew. Because I'm just going straight off the dome. This is just me. Because first of all, the God that we believe in says so. That one verse should be the only thing that should keep us on the narrow path, which means that we have to be awake and sober. But obviously we're humans and we need other things like signs. So we need to have a common goal that we want to strive towards, and ultimately we need perspective, the word, vision, priorities, routine, and mercy.
It's amazing
from God.
how it all fits together, isn't it?
It's crazy how all of these things apply to this one little scripture, Matthew 13 and 14.
Matthew
know?
7. Yeah, Matthew 7.
Matthew, sorry, my fault.
No, that's all right.
Matthew 7, 13 through 14. So it's like you need all of them combined to live an awake and sober life.
Yeah, I think it's good. I'll give my perspective on why this matters for Awake and Sober.
It's going to be better.
I think, just different perspective. Different perspective. I like your perspective. I think it's easy. We just want to fall asleep. And we just want life to be easy for us, and we want to just coast through. But that's not real life. Real life, if you want to experience real life, it's going to come with some hard stuff. And we need to be sober for it, awake for it, be alert for it, realize that it's going to come. Realize that instead of me feeling sorry for myself because my life is narrowing, I just don't get to have as much fun anymore.
Right.
I remember Abby, your sister, used to, when she got older, she said something like, well, now I know what Christmas is all about. The magic is gone. Because she saw behind the scenes. When she was a kid, Mom and I would create this whole scenario for Christmas and wake up. Well, she gets older and she sees behind the scenes and it's like, oh, this isn't as special. But now she's married and she has to do Christmas of her own. It's
as special.
The life, it's just as special. It's just different special.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I want us to be aware of, is that the narrow path is special, and the restrictions are actually there because we have a purpose and we have something that God has in store for us. And if we don't yield to the narrow path, we head down a path of destruction.
Right.
And that's the easy path. And instead we decide, you know what, life is, there's so much we can get out of this life. Let's make sure that we find it. Yeah. And it's found in the narrow path. And it's found through Jesus.
And I know you guys are watching this right now, but if you guys are the Teen Challenge boys, then just know that I had the same perspective as you, that a sober life isn't fun. But as my dad just said, you might not see it right now. You might see, all the magic in doing whatever you're doing before you went there. But you might not see the magic right now of being sober, but you will later, and you'll see the fruits multiply. And if you really dedicate yourself to it, you'll be in awe of how far you will build your life and how well you will turn out if you really stay the path and stay awake and sober. So,
all right.
That's it.
I think that's it.
That's it.
Pretty good. All right.
Peace.